Joshua Niles and Amber Washburn. A manhunt commenced to capture an active shooter who had just fatally shot Joshua Niles, a 28-year-old man. A vigilant neighbor witnessed the entire episode and immediately notified the authorities, providing a description of the suspect clad in a black hoodie. Meanwhile, as the shooter attempted to escape the location, Amber Washburn, Josh's 24-year-old wife, arrived in the driveway with their 4-year-old child. Tragically, the assailant fired at Amber while she was inside the car, yet fortunately, the child seated in the rear remained unharmed. The gunfire alerted a nearby deputy, who quickly rushed to the scene. To his shock, he discovered a lifeless male lying beneath a truck. Upon closer inspection, he observed another vehicle parked across the street. Inside, he found a lifeless woman in the front seat and a terrified child clutching his McNuggets in the back. The child, though physically unscathed, was undoubtedly traumatized by the horrific event. The pressing question remained: who was this assailant? What drove them to end the lives of two innocent individuals with promising futures? Most importantly, why expose an innocent child to such a harrowing ordeal? Joshua Niles, born in 1990, was raised in a large, close-knit family, fostering a deep sense of love and devotion. As a dedicated family man, he actively participated in the well-being of his loved ones. During his teenage years, Joshua developed a strong bond with his high school girlfriend, Charlene "Charlie" Albert. Their relationship led to the birth of two children: Gabby, born in 2008 when Charlie was 16 and Joshua was 18, and Bentley, born 2 years later. Despite their youth, the couple successfully managed the challenges of parenthood until their eventual separation in 2012. After the split, Charlene moved to Texas with her parents, and a co-parenting custody agreement was arranged. Joshua would have the children during the summer, while they stayed with their mother during the school year. In 2012, a new chapter opened in Joshua's life when he met and fell in love with 18-year-old Amber Washburn. Every summer, Gabby and Bentley would visit, and Amber became an integral part of their lives. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. The couple's love story continued to thrive, and in 2014, they welcomed their son, Joshua Jr. While Joshua worked as a landscaper, Amber pursued a career at an overnight bakery. Together, they nurtured dreams of creating a stable future, including marriage, a successful business, and a happy family life. Despite the challenges of raising their 4-year-old son, Joshua Jr., who was on the autism spectrum, they remained committed parents. However, their lives took a tragic turn when Joshua's past resurfaced, leading to a devastating outcome for both him and Amber. The events transpired on a fateful afternoon in Sodus, New York, on October 22, 2018. The peaceful atmosphere outside their home was suddenly disrupted by gunfire. Multiple 911 calls flooded the dispatch, prompting a rapid response from law enforcement. Coincidentally, a Wayne County deputy was nearby, serving an unrelated eviction notice. Upon hearing the reports, the deputy quickly moved toward the chaotic scene. What he discovered was a lifeless man lying beneath a truck. As he scanned the area, he observed another vehicle parked across the street. On closer inspection, he found a lifeless woman in the front seat and a terrified child clutching his McNuggets in the back. Acting promptly, the deputy prioritized the child's safety and handed him over to a concerned neighbor. Once the child was secure, he called for backup and began processing the scene. The responding officers meticulously collected evidence from the crime scene, including Amber's wallet, which was found on her lap and contained her driver's license, identifying her as Amber Washburn. Deputies identified the male victim beneath the truck in the driveway as Joshua Niles. Police confirmed that Joshua and his partner resided in the home where the shooting took place. Now, when law enforcement questioned the neighbors about the child, they confirmed that the child is Joshua and Amber's son, Joshua Jr. However, a pressing question remains. Where is the shooter now? It is clear that an armed individual remains at large, as police responded immediately following the gunfire. Authorities are actively attempting to identify and apprehend the shooter, believing they may still be in the community. Officials have issued warnings to residents in the surrounding area, instructing them to stay indoors until the situation is resolved. Due to the numerous potential hiding spots, a perimeter has been established. The primary witness in this case is Tiffany Thayer, the neighbor living next door to Joshua and Amber. Her kitchen window overlooks their driveway, providing an unobstructed view of the events. Tiffany reported seeing Joshua engaged in conversation with an unknown male, who eventually guided him toward the truck. Initially, the exchange appeared casual, but it quickly escalated into a horrific scene as the stranger raised a gun and fired at Joshua. When Amber arrived home in her car, her driver's side window was open. Witnessing the situation, she attempted to reverse and escape, but the shooter turned and fatally shot her in the head. Once the assailant confirmed Amber's death, their focus returned to Joshua. Despite his attempts to take cover under the truck, he was unable to avoid the multiple shots fired at him. Determining the motive and identifying the perpetrator behind these double homicides is proving difficult. The manner in which Amber was killed suggests the assailant possesses some proficiency with handguns, as the shot was challenging to execute. Detectives' initial assessment is that the incident exhibits many characteristics of an assassination. Additional neighbors reported glimpsing the perpetrator before he fled, and their accounts allowed police to compile a suspect description. According to these witnesses, the culprit was a slender Caucasian male wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. Some neighbors offered further details, noting that he had darker hair, a beard, and wore glasses. Initially, the officers launched a manhunt with the aid of canine trackers, attempting to follow the shooter by scent. One neighbor also provided crucial information regarding the shooter's last known direction, which led toward the rear of the house and over a fence. The canine tracker alerted to a piece of black cloth, later identified as a ski mask or balaclava, which became a key piece of evidence in identifying the shooter. The investigation progressed as they followed the trail through the neighborhood. Ultimately, the police had to reluctantly acknowledge that the shooter had successfully escaped the perimeter. Meanwhile, homicide detectives focused on speaking with Joshua and Amber's son to gain a clearer understanding of the events. Unfortunately, due to being on the autism spectrum and nonverbal, the child was unable to provide any information during the initial investigation. At the crime scene, the forensic unit meticulously processed the driveway where the shooting took place. Their examination revealed that Joshua had been shot a total of 10 times. All the recovered shell casings were from the same firearm, consistent with the witness statement given by Tiffany Thayer. This confirmed that only one shooter was involved. The detectives recovered 9 9mm shell casings, which they hoped would assist in matching the gun if a suspected weapon was located. It was evident that Amber had also been killed with the same firearm. The police were confident that this was not a random act of violence and had been carefully planned. While the bodies were being transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy, detectives contacted the families of Josh and Amber to relay the tragic news. During these initial conversations, police inquired about any potential threats or grudges against the couple. Was there anyone who harbored animosity toward them? Joshua's family assured the authorities that it was highly unlikely anyone would hold a grudge against him, as he was a kind and beloved person. Amber's parents expressed the same sentiment regarding their daughter. However, as the police examined Joshua's past, they encountered a recurring name: Charlene Childers, Joshua's ex-girlfriend. According to the family, their relationship had been turbulent. Despite having 2 children together, Joshua and Charlene had mutually decided to separate in 2012, after which Charlene moved to Texas with her parents. There, she married Chase Childers, who had been involved in raising Joshua's children. Unfortunately, this marriage also ended in divorce when Charlene began an affair with the town's police chief, Timothy Dean. Their relationship initially started as a friendship during Charlene's employment at the Animal Control Department, which worked closely with the police department. Over time, their connection developed into a romantic one, culminating in their marriage in March 2018. Charlene frequently posted pictures of her new family, including Tim, on her social media accounts. However, legal issues emerged for Charlene and her husband in late 2018, which had implications for Joshua and Charlene's older children. At this stage, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together, offering detectives a glimmer of hope in solving the case. To understand the motive behind the shooting, it was vital to explore Joshua and Charlene's past. Detectives learned that Joshua was involved in an ongoing custody dispute with Charlene Childers over their 2 children at the time of his death. Charlene's recent trip to New York to retrieve her children, shortly before the shooting, raised suspicions about her possible involvement in the double homicide. However, after thorough investigation, It was confirmed that Charlene could not have been the shooter, as she was verified to be at her workplace during the incident. When questioned about her relationship with Joshua, Charlene acknowledged previous conflicts, but denied harboring any deep grudges against him. She stressed that, despite their differences, she never wished him harm. The discussion then turned to Charlene's current husband, Timothy Dean, and detectives were surprised to learn that she was no longer with him and that divorce proceedings had been initiated. Charlene expressed her frustration, attributing the loss of custody of her children to Tim's influence, highlighting the strain in their relationship. Further investigation revealed that Tim was residing in Texas at the time, prompting detectives to delve into the dynamics of their marriage and the underlying causes of their disputes. Charlene provided more details about the issues that led to their estrangement, shedding light on a complex web of relationship challenges and legal battles. Delving deeper into Tim's situation, detectives discovered that he had recently lost his job. When reaching out to his former colleagues, troubling details emerged. They described Tim as having a little man syndrome, indicating that he had an inflated sense of importance due to his position as chief of police. However, behind his back, people often mocked his behavior. The reason for Tim's job loss stemmed from a disturbing incident captured in a video uploaded by Charlene on Facebook in May 2018. The video depicted Tim yelling at his 3-year-old daughter, Madison, for not eating her food. Within a few days, severe consequences unfolded for Tim, including his arrest, loss of custody of his daughter, and resignation as police chief. Charlene's custody of her children was also lost, leading to the crumbling of their marriage. Eventually, the kids returned to live with their father, Joshua, in New York, leaving Charlene and Tim to face the consequences of their actions. When asked about Tim and their relationship, his ex-wife, Christina Hill, responded differently. After Tim resigned, detectives discovered that he had found a job as a driver for a local vending company. However, it was later revealed that Tim had been consistently missing shifts at his new job. Interestingly, one of the days he missed his shift coincided with the day of the shootout in Sodus. Further investigation uncovered that Tim had also been involved in a car crash in Kansas just 2 days before the murder occurred. What's intriguing is that the vehicle involved in the crash was a rental car. An officer arrived at the scene and engaged in a conversation with Tim. It became evident that Tim was providing a fabricated explanation to the police officer. He claimed that he was attempting to make a U-turn because he had run out of gas and was searching for a gas station. This led him to drive off the shoulder of the road and into a culvert, resulting in damage to the vehicle. However, one major question remains. Why was Tim in Kansas in the first place? Tim spoke to the officer, expressing distress about his personal life and mentioning the possibility of a divorce, stating that everything seemed to be falling apart. However, a significant finding in the footage raised concerns. Tim mentioned that he possessed a sidearm and a shotgun. This left the detective feeling uneasy, sensing that something was amiss. Upon further investigation at the rental agency, the officer discovered that Tim was carrying additional firearms, including an AR-15 and several handguns, along with ammunition and body armor. This discovery added another layer of complexity to the situation, raising questions about Tim's intentions and why he was armed with such an arsenal. Now, when inquired about his destination, he provided a captivating response. To confirm their suspicions, investigators scrutinized the rental agreements and detected an irregularity. The rental agreement indicated that the vehicle was leased to an individual named Braun Bowler. Upon conducting further investigation, they uncovered that Braun had a close association with Tim. It was revealed that Braun and Tim were friends who had served together during Tim's tenure as the chief of police. Intrigued by this connection, investigators decided to question Braun in order to gather more information about the circumstances surrounding the rental car and Tim's activities. Braun Bowler had an 11-year career as a Texas police officer, most recently at the Sunray Police Department. As previously mentioned, Tim and Braun were close friends, having served together during Tim's time as police chief. According to Braun's statement, Tim was unable to leave work to drive to New York, so Braun stepped in to assist. With Tim's credit cards maxed out and him falling behind, Braun agreed to rent the car under his own name. Now, during the interrogation, Braun was asked to reflect on his years in law enforcement and his relationship with Tim. He stated that initially, he didn't question Tim's request for the rental car, assuming it was for local use. It wasn't until he received a troubling call about Tim crashing the car in Kansas that he began to doubt Tim's intentions. During the interview, Braun vehemently denied having any knowledge of Tim's plans to take the car to New York. He expressed genuine sympathy for Tim's situation and trusted him enough not to question his motives. However, when asked to undergo a polygraph test, Braun's results were less than satisfactory, leading to further interrogation. In subsequent questioning, Braun disclosed shocking information. He confessed to overhearing Tim discussing plans to harm someone and revealed that Tim had rented the car under Braun's name to avoid suspicion. Braun's collaboration swiftly redirected the investigation onto a new path. After the interview, Braun was permitted to return home, but law enforcement maintained close surveillance on him. Once an arrest warrant was obtained, Braun was promptly taken into custody. Concurrently, in Dumas, Texas, law enforcement officers encircled Tim Dean's residence, fully aware of the potential threat posed by his extensive collection of firearms. Recognizing the necessity for a cautious approach, they opted for a discreet nighttime operation to apprehend him. With meticulous precision, they deployed a flashbang inside the house to disorient Tim and create an opportunity for his safe arrest. Law enforcement officers acted swiftly and efficiently, ensuring that he no longer posed a danger. Meanwhile, a DNA test was conducted, confirming that his DNA matched the DNA found on the abandoned ski mask at the crime scene. With Tim now in custody, the process of interrogation and uncovering the truth behind the tragic events in Sodus could commence. Armed with a bottle of water, detectives endeavored to untangle the complexities surrounding his connection to Joshua and Amber. Tim recounted his interactions with the couple, emphasizing instances when he had been present during their custody exchanges. Tim did not appear to hold any personal animosity towards Joshua. The detectives then dropped a bombshell, presenting evidence that placed Tim in the vicinity of the crime scene at the time of the murders. They sought an explanation for his presence in New York. Tim's account was somewhat vague. Initially, he claimed to have intended to reconcile with Charlene's uncle. However, it seemed that he ended up aimlessly driving, consuming alcohol, and becoming lost in his own troubles. The detectives intensified their efforts, attempting to make Tim confront reality. They reminded him of the gravity of the situation and stressed the importance of taking responsibility for his actions. Despite their persistent urging, Tim remained steadfast in his denial of any involvement in the murders. Upon concluding the interrogation, the detectives came to the realization that their efforts were futile. Tim's unwavering denial clearly indicated that extracting a confession would be an arduous task. Nevertheless, undeterred by this setback, they remained resolute in their pursuit of uncovering the truth behind the deaths of Joshua and Amber. However, their interest extended beyond just one individual in Texas. The investigators decided to revisit Charlene, the only person they had yet to thoroughly question. Tracking her down at her ex-boyfriend's residence, the police brought her in for further inquiry. Despite not being the shooter and being elsewhere in New York at the time of the murders, there were reasons to suspect her involvement. During a previous conversation with the police, Charlene falsely claimed to have learned about Joshua's death through a Facebook post which raised suspicions since no public post had disclosed the victims' identities. Another cause for concern was Charlene's alleged role in driving Braun, the individual whose name the rental car was registered under, to the agency just 8 days after the murders. They once again inquired about how she became aware of the killings. Charlene stuck to her fabricated Facebook story, asserting that she had received the news during a call with Joshua's mother. As the interrogation progressed, the facade of Charlene's concocted tales began to crumble. The detectives delved deeper, probing Charlene about Tim's relationship with Joshua and any potential motives he may have had to harm him. Charlene disclosed that Joshua had previously been abusive towards her, but emphasized that Tim had never spoken ill of him except for expressing a willingness to confront him if necessary. The detectives then pressed Charlene regarding her association with Braun, the friend she had driven to rent the car. Charlene evaded the questions, claiming ignorance about Braun's affairs and assuming the trip was work-related. However, as the inquiries regarding distance and fuel consumption persisted, Charlene's responses grew less assured, hinting at her mounting unease. Upon noticing this, the detectives directly confronted Charlene, inquiring about her potential role in the murders or if she had influenced the perpetrator to commit the heinous act. Charlene vehemently denied any involvement. Her demeanor betrayed her true emotions. As the pressure of the interrogation mounted, Charlene's resolve began to crumble, and under the intensified questioning, she eventually confessed to her participation in the murders. Charlene proceeded to disclose to the detectives that following the loss of custody of her children in August, she had a conversation with Tim where she expressed her frustration with Joshua. She recounted how she vented her feelings to Tim, who seemingly shared her sentiments and expressed his own frustrations. Driven by her desperation to regain a sense of normalcy where she could have her children during the school year while Joshua had them for the summer and holidays, Charlene engaged in discussions with Tim about drastic measures. However, she claimed to have limited knowledge about the specifics of the firearm, except that it belonged to the Center Police Department. In the lead-up to the murders, Tim, Charlene, and Braun held meetings in Tim's garage, where they carefully devised their plan to eliminate Joshua. Charlene's role involved dropping off Braun at the rental agency, after which he would drive the rental car to Tim. Tim would then travel to New York to carry out the murder. According to Charlene's account, the plan was simple: eliminate Joshua. However, she insisted that Amber was never meant to be part of the scheme. When Tim crashed the rental car, Charlene drove to meet him at the motel and later dropped him off at the airport to obtain a new rental car, intending to resume their plan on November 5, 2018. This chilling revelation gave detectives a clearer understanding of the premeditated nature of the crime and the extent of Charlene's involvement in orchestrating it. Another disturbing fact that intensified the grief of the victims' loved ones was that Charlene had attended the funeral, deceitfully pretending to mourn. Charlene and Tim were charged in connection with the murders of Josh and Amber on November 5, 2018. Wayne County Sheriff Barry Vert suggested that the double homicide stemmed from a child custody dispute, with Timothy being the one who pulled the trigger. Timothy faced charges of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Although he was in Texas at the time, he was expected to be extradited to face the charges. Charlene, meanwhile, was charged with conspiracy and other offenses and was held in the Wayne County Jail. Charlene pleaded guilty on June 27, 2019, and testified against Timothy as part of a deal with the prosecutor. She revealed that the plan involved stealing a gun from the Sunray Police Department in Texas, where Timothy had previously served as police chief. Prosecutors stated that Timothy then traveled back to New York to carry out the murders. When asked about Joshua's death and the custody battle, Charlene admitted, "I got what I wanted." Timothy Dean was found guilty of 2 counts of murder by a jury and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in August 2019. The judge informed Timothy that he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars, noting his lack of emotion or remorse during the trial and labeling him a classic psychopath. During the court proceedings, Braun Bowler, the former police officer who assisted Dean in renting a car for the crime, faced emotional statements from the victims' families. They expressed their grief over the loss of their loved ones and the devastating impact on their lives. Braun pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and served 1 year and 4 months in prison before being released. Meanwhile, Charlene was sentenced to 28 years in prison for her role in the murders. The judge described the case as one of the most senseless and tragic he had ever presided over. The victims' families were left to cope with the profound loss caused by the senseless violence orchestrated by those they once trusted. The entire incident upended countless lives. It was especially devastating for the children. Gabby, the older of Joshua and Charlene's 2 children, was deeply hurt and confused. Joshua's sister, Nicole, had to step into care for Joshua's older children after his death. She already had 4 children of her own, making the situation extremely challenging. She sought assistance through a GoFundMe page to raise funds, but the response was limited. Joshua's younger brother now resides in the family home with his girlfriend. They are caring for Joshua's 2 dogs and planting flowers in his memory. They strive to keep his spirit alive in their hearts. While nothing can bring Joshua and Amber back, their families take comfort in knowing that those responsible for taking their lives are now serving their sentences in prison. Moving on to the next case. Karen Slattery and Georgiana Warren. A girl accepted a babysitting job, intending to care for 2 children for only a few hours, but that night quickly turned into a nightmare in real life. The horrifying events that unfolded sent shockwaves throughout the town, compelling detectives to devote all their resources to unraveling the mystery. Ultimately, they uncovered a chilling truth that left the entire nation stunned. Karen Slattery was born on September 18, 1969, in New York. She had one older brother and loving parents who were devoted Catholics. When Karen was just 1 year old, the family chose to relocate to Florida, eventually settling in a suburban community called Boynton Beach. As she grew, Karen began attending the local Catholic school and became active in different activities such as softball, swimming, and gymnastics. Living in a coastal town, she and her friends frequently spent time at the beach, basking in the sun and enjoying the warm ocean waters. A few years after their relocation, Karen's younger sister was born, and the two formed a very close bond. Her little sister admired her, copied all her interests, and essentially viewed Karen as her role model. At age 14, Karen entered high school, which offered a special babysitting program. The concept was straightforward. Parents who needed a babysitter for their children would reach out to the school, and the school would assign a student from the program who had undergone the required training. For Karen, this represented a wonderful chance to earn her first bit of money. She adored children and already had extensive experience caring for her younger sister, so she enrolled immediately. Karen rapidly earned the respect and trust of local families. They were fond of her as well as their children, so she always had many babysitting opportunities available. At the same time, she excelled in swimming and hoped to use her athletic talent to win a college scholarship after completing high school. On March 24, 1984, Karen had been assigned to babysit two girls whose parents had hired her on numerous previous occasions. Although Karen initially wanted to spend that weekend with her friends and even thought about refusing the job, she ultimately chose not to. One of Karen's close friends had recently moved to another state, and she was eager to visit her during the upcoming school break. To make that trip possible, Karen needed to save up for plane tickets. That evening, her mother drove her to the family's home where she was scheduled to babysit. The parents greeted her warmly, reminded her to lock all the doors, and then left for the night. For several hours, everything was perfectly normal. Karen and the girls played games, watched cartoons, had dinner, and by around 9:30 p.m., she tucked them into bed. Afterward, she returned to the living room and called her best friend. They chatted excitedly about plans for the next day. The friend's father had gotten them tickets to a baseball game, and both were looking forward to it. Once that call ended, Karen phoned another friend who also happened to be babysitting that evening. They exchanged stories about their nights, and Karen mentioned she was about to head into the kitchen to grab something to eat. She promised to call back shortly, but that call never came. Since it was already late, her friend assumed Karen had simply fallen asleep. Around midnight, the girls' parents returned home and immediately sensed something was off. The porch light, which they always kept on at night, was off. Inside, the house was completely dark, and even the television had been turned off. As they reached the front door, they discovered it was unlocked. Thinking Karen might have forgotten to secure it, they stepped inside and began calling her name. There was no answer. Switching on lights as they moved through the house, they eventually reached the kitchen and were confronted with a horrifying scene. A large pool of blood covered the floor, and the wall-mounted phone dangled from its cord nearby. A long trail of blood stretched from the kitchen down the hallway, leading toward the bedrooms where the children were sleeping. Both bedroom doors were closed, but a faint light glowed beneath one of them. Fearing that someone might still be inside, the father told his wife to run to the neighbors and contact the police. He remained behind, torn between the desire to check on his daughters and the dread that they might already be dead, unable to bring himself to open the door. A few minutes later, a patrol officer arrived at the scene. He instructed the father to wait outside and began to search the house. Opening the girls' door, he found them both lying in bed, fast asleep and unharmed. The officer gently picked them up and carried the girls outside to their parents, who were overcome with relief that their children were safe. But their relief quickly turned into dread when they remembered Karen and told the officer that another girl was still inside the house. The officer returned and followed the trail of blood, which led to the master bedroom door. When he opened it, he found a body lying on the floor. He checked for a pulse, but there was none. While he was inside the room, more police officers and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Investigators soon identified the victim as Karen Slattery. Her clothing was partly missing, suggesting a possible assault, and a towel had been placed across her face. Her body displayed multiple injuries consistent with stab wounds. After Karen's body was taken away for further examination, detectives began to search the house for evidence. They noticed that a window in the living room was open and that the screen had been cut. They also discovered boot prints and trampled vegetation outside several windows, suggesting that the intruder might have been observing Karen from outside before cutting the screen and breaking into the house. The investigators uncovered several more unusual clues. Along with the boot prints, there were also barefoot tracks both outside on the ground and inside the house. This implied that the perpetrator had taken off their boots before entering. While speaking with the homeowners, police learned that Karen always locked the front door when babysitting. Since the door was unlocked when they came back, detectives concluded that the killer might have left through it after the attack. Regarding the open window, the homeowners explained that they had left it open before departing because the weather was cool and refreshing that day. Realizing that their decision might have allowed the killer access into the house, they were both horrified and began blaming themselves for Karen's death. Police also found bicycle tracks in the yard, suggesting that the killer had likely arrived by bike and used it to escape. They traced the tire marks to the main road along the coast, but the trail stopped there. Forensic specialists tried to make casts of the barefoot prints, but they were smudged. No foreign fingerprints were located anywhere in the house, which was extremely unusual. From the evidence in the bathroom, it appeared that the intruder had taken a shower, yet even there, no fingerprints were present. Investigators believe the assailant attacked Karen while she was standing near the phone in the kitchen. Close by, they discovered a bloodied hammer, which may have been the first weapon used. No knife consistent with the victim's wounds was found in the house, implying that the killer had taken it away. The hammer was determined to have come from a cabinet inside the house, showing that the attacker had searched for it before striking Karen. He had also removed a pair of women's gloves from the same cabinet, which he likely took with him when leaving. No other possessions, including valuables, were missing from the residence, casting doubt on the idea that it had been a burglary gone wrong. The medical examiners identified 18 stab wounds on Karen's body, which were determined to be the cause of death. They also confirmed that she had been assaulted and discovered biological material on her body, but DNA analysis was still in its early stages at the time and not widely applied. Curiously, a piece of chewing gum was found stuck to her shorts. Karen had only recently gotten her braces removed and had been thrilled to finally chew gum again. Yet the experts were confused about how it ended up on her shorts, speculating that the killer might have placed it there. With no other strong leads, the police appealed to the public for assistance, asking for any information regarding suspicious men possibly riding bicycles and behaving strangely around town. Investigators also started reviewing individuals with previous records of breaking and entering, hoping to link someone to the crime. The news of Karen's murder sent shockwaves throughout the town. Parents grew fearful, convinced that a dangerous offender was at large, and stopped allowing their children to go anywhere alone. The school's babysitting program also went through a major transformation. What had once been the common practice of having students babysit in the children's homes was now considered too dangerous. From that point on, the girls were told to stay alert at all times, double-check every window and door, and if possible, work in pairs. It was even suggested that parents drop their children off at the babysitter's house instead and collect them afterwards. The local police department devoted nearly all of its resources to the case, as the community demanded that the killer be caught as soon as possible. They attempted to question the girls Karen had been babysitting, hoping they might have witnessed something. One of them mentioned being awakened by a man with blood on his face, but she couldn't recall any other details. Regarding the parents, a theory quickly developed that they might have been somehow involved in the murder. The suspicion stemmed mainly from the fact that they had the opportunity to commit the crime, though no clear motive was evident. The doubts only deepened when the family moved to another state just 2 days after the incident. Before long, the police identified another suspect. One of the officers was pursuing a completely unrelated case involving the burglary of a mobile home. When the detective tracked down the suspect, he discovered that the individual had been traveling by bicycle. But that was not all. Traces resembling blood were found on one of the bike's handlebars, and a piece of gum was stuck in the spokes. The gum was the same color as the one found on Karen's shorts. The investigator sent the bicycle to the lab and began considering the possibility that Karen's murder might have been the result of a failed burglary. However, the lab analysis revealed that the gum was a different flavor, and what had appeared to be blood on the handlebar was actually just paint. As the police continued their hunt for the killer, Karen's friends and family established a fund offering a reward for information leading to an arrest, initially set at $10,000. The amount soon increased to $30,000 and eventually reached $50,000. The community was eager to bring the perpetrator to justice, not only to provide closure for Karen's family, but also to ensure their own safety. The substantial sum of money generated thousands of calls to the police department, and officers attempted to follow up on every tip. Many people urged the authorities to investigate the parents of the girls Karen had been babysitting, believing they might have been involved in the murder. Ultimately, the detectives were compelled to make a public statement clarifying that the parents were not considered suspects and that their alibi had been thoroughly checked. Shortly thereafter, a woman living just a few streets from the crime scene contacted the police with an unusual story. She stated that she had returned home to find drops of blood on the floor and a note addressed to her nephew. Investigators contacted the nephew, who confirmed the woman's account. According to him, the note had been written by his 22-year-old friend, who had a criminal record and had left the state the day after Karen's murder. Detectives tracked the man to Ohio, where he admitted that he had indeed written the note and slid it through the mail slot at the woman's house. But he claimed he didn't see any blood and insisted that he had nothing to do with the murder. He agreed to provide a DNA sample and undergo a polygraph test. During that test, the operator flagged several of his answers as deceptive, but the man continued to deny any involvement in the crime. In the end, with insufficient evidence to make an arrest, the police had no choice but to continue their investigation. Around this time, the county police department received a new, expensive device that could detect fingerprints with 10 times the efficiency of older technology. The investigators working on Karen's case requested to borrow the device and decided to re-examine the crime scene. This time, they managed to uncover dozens of new fingerprints. However, after running them through their database, the experts concluded that all these prints belonged to the family members and their friends. In the next few weeks, the police followed up on thousands of leads and investigated numerous suspects, but nothing led to a breakthrough. The situation was further complicated by the fact that crime rates in the city had nearly reached record highs that year. The number of murders, assaults, and other crimes had significantly increased, putting additional strain on the police force. At one point, the police even recommended that parents submit their children's fingerprints to make it easier to locate them in case of a kidnapping, and many people responded to this request. For a while, there were no significant developments in Karen's case, but 2 months after the murder, everything changed. On May 29th, police discovered the body of 38-year-old Georgiana Warren in her home, just a few miles from Karen's town. Georgiana was found on her bed with a pillow covering her face, and a hammer was lying nearby. The house showed numerous signs of a struggle, including traces of blood on the bed and in the bathroom, as well as indications that the perpetrator had taken a shower. Investigators determined that the killer likely entered the house through a window. Medical experts found that Georgiana had been assaulted and recovered biological material from the body. The detectives couldn't help but notice the striking similarities between this murder and Karen's. It was almost a replica. Georgiana's 2 daughters were in the house that night, but the attacker left them unharmed and they heard nothing. Everyone suspected that the same person was responsible for both crimes. But once again, no fingerprints were found at the scene. At the end, experts decided to examine a book found next to the bed, checking all of its pages for fingerprints. They hoped the killer might have touched it during the murder, so they used the expensive new device to analyze every page. And this effort paid off. They discovered a foreign fingerprint on page 43, which could potentially belong to the murderer. In 1984, there were no digital fingerprint databases, but the detectives were able to compare this print with those of all suspects, hoping for a match. They also uncovered another possible link between the murders of Karen and Georgiana. It turned out that one of Karen's friends had been babysitting her children just days before the murder. Detective Kevin McCoy began to consider that the elusive killer might be connected to other cases that weren't immediately obvious. The perpetrator's ability to avoid leaving fingerprints and evade witnesses suggested significant experience with such crimes. McCoy then recalled an unusual case he had been assigned a month before Karen's murder in Boca Raton. An unknown man had broken into a woman's bedroom, struck her several times with a heavy object, removed her clothing and ring, and then simply left. The woman survived, but the injuries resulted in severe brain damage. Detective McCoy suspected that the same perpetrator might be responsible, but unfortunately, the victim was unable to recall any details about the attacker. As McCoy continued to search for connections to other cases, he came across another intriguing incident. On May 22nd, 2 months after Karen's murder, a woman was returning home with her son around 2 a.m. To their surprise, they saw a man removing the security screen from their window and attempting to break into the house. The woman's son chased the man, who tried to escape on his bicycle. Although the cyclist managed to briefly evade capture, the son eventually tackled him. The struggle was short, but the man managed to break free and escape by jumping into a canal, disappearing from view. In his haste, the man left behind not only his bicycle, but also his sneakers, which were found under the window. It appeared he had removed them before the homeowners returned. 2 days later, a woman in the same town woke up to a heavy blow to her head and screamed. When she opened her eyes, she saw a man running out of her bedroom. That same evening, a man burst into another woman's bedroom and began threatening her. The woman screamed loudly, which apparently scared off the intruder. He simply turned and left. 4 days later, a similar incident occurred. An unknown man broke into another woman's home and frightened her, causing her to scream. The attacker left the house, stumbled and fell into her pool before fleeing. Detective McCoy believed all these incidents were connected, and soon focused on a new series of crimes. Over the past few months, several female students from a local university reported a man exposing himself on campus and breaking into their dorms. They all described him as a white male of average height with short, dark hair, and the police created a composite sketch of the suspect. McCoy took this sketch and began examining a large book of mugshots of individuals who had been charged with SEC offenses. As he carefully studied each face, one of them caught his eye. It looked just like the sketch. He pulled that photo out, mixed it with a few others, and then showed them to one of the students who had seen the suspect. Without hesitation, she pointed to the man she recognized. The man was 23-year-old Dwayne Owen, who had a lengthy criminal history ranging from theft to public indecency and other offenses. This was enough to get a warrant, but there was a catch. The detective had no clue where Owen was. McCoy put out a citywide alert, sending his photo to every cop in the area. A few days later, an officer was patrolling the streets when she noticed a man who looked strikingly similar to Owen. She asked for his identification, and he presented a military ID under the name Dan Brown. The officer suspected that the ID might be fake because the man looked so much like Owen's mugshot. So, she decided to arrest him and take him in for questioning. After running his fingerprints against those on file, it was clear this was Dwayne Owen. This allowed authorities to charge him with using a false ID, which led to his imprisonment while they focused on linking him to the murders and assaults. During interrogation, Owen admitted that the sneakers and bicycle found in the crime scene where he had tried to enter a house through a window belonged to him. He also confessed to several burglaries, but continued to deny any involvement in the murders. At the time, it was still not possible to match his DNA with the biological material from the crime scenes, because the technology wasn't there yet. Detectives questioned Owen for hours. He clearly enjoyed the process, often speaking in riddles and sometimes answering their questions in poems. Would ask directly if he had killed anyone, he simply said yes, but didn't provide any details. Interestingly, they asked him how many people he had killed. He remained silent. Instead, he drew the number 2 on the table with his finger. The man also bragged to the detectives that he knew criminology inside out and could commit crimes without getting caught. But he overlooked one crucial detail. Authorities had requested a comparison of his fingerprints with those found on one of the pages in Georgiana's book, and they finally made a breakthrough. The fingerprints matched. When detectives returned to the interrogation room and informed Owen that his fingerprints had been found at one of the crime scenes, Owen responded with a smile, saying, "I must have touched that stupid book lying on the bed." Soon after, Owen began to talk, confessing to all the details of this crime. He described how he wandered the streets looking for a house with a potential victim, broke in and carried out the murder, giving detailed accounts of Georgiana's killing. One of the most chilling details was that Owen had brought a clean set of clothes and left them on his bike, planning to change after the crime. But despite this confession, Owen continued to deny involvement in Karen's murder, and the police still didn't have any evidence to link him. So, One of the detectives decided to bluff. He took Owen's footprints, but none of the footprints at Karen's crime scene matched because they were all smudged. The detective then decided to try a little trick. He took some random photo of a bloody footprint and placed it next to Owen's footprint. Then he told Owen they had a match, and now had proof he was in the house. To the detective's surprise, the bluff worked. Owen looked at the photos and admitted they did look alike. Not long after, he started confessing. According to Owen, he had been riding his bicycle around the neighborhood when, at about 8 p.m., he saw Karen through a window and decided to kill her. First, he went to a bar, had a drink, stayed for a while, and then returned to the house after nightfall. There, he observed the victim through the window for some time before taking off his socks and placing them on his hands to prevent leaving fingerprints on the window frame. Once inside, he hid in a closet, where he discovered a pair of women's gloves and a hammer. After some time, he saw Karen walk into the kitchen and pick up the phone. Owen panicked, believing she might have seen him and was contacting the police. He leapt from his hiding spot, attacked her, and dragged her into the master bedroom to assault her. Owen then showered, gathered his bloody clothing, and went outside to conceal them in nearby bushes. He mocked the detectives, saying they had done a poor job because they never searched all the bushes in the area. Regarding the knife, he rode his bicycle to the ocean and tossed it into the water. After discarding the evidence, he returned home, where he lived with his brother and another roommate. He turned the kitchen wall clock back by 2 hours and made loud noises until both roommates awoke. When they came out and told him to be quiet, he apologized and asked, "What time is it now?" Both men looked at the clock and saw the incorrect time. Owen hoped this would provide him with an alibi if the police questioned his roommates. Following his confession, Owen was charged with the 2 murders and imprisoned while awaiting trial. As investigators delved into Dwayne Owen's past, they discovered a deeply troubling history. Owen had grown up in extremely difficult circumstances. His parents, who struggled with drug and alcohol abuse, died when he was still a child. Consequently, he and his brother were placed in multiple foster homes. As an adult, Owen briefly served in the military and later took criminal justice courses in college. He eventually admitted that he had once hoped to become a police officer, but a minor criminal record destroyed those aspirations. Frustrated by his failed ambitions, he chose to follow a different path. After being charged with the murders, he also confessed to many other crimes, including assaults, indecent exposure, voyeurism, as well as breaking and entering. At the same time, he maintained that Karen and Georgiana were the only victims he had killed. While waiting for his trial, Owen nearly succeeded in escaping from prison. He climbed inside a trash bin, hoping it would be carried onto a truck and taken out of the facility. Fortunately, guards discovered him before he could get away. The trial for Karen's murder started a year later. He refused to admit guilt, and his defense lawyers argued that his confessions had been forced and that his rights had been violated. However, when the full confession tapes were presented in court, there was no doubt regarding his guilt. Ultimately, Owen was given 2 death sentences, one for Karen's murder and the other for Georgiana's. Along with the murder convictions, he also received 6 life sentences for his additional crimes. Since then, Owen has remained on death row awaiting the execution of his sentence. Yet his story did not end there. Owen quickly filed an appeal in Karen's case, claiming that his right to remain silent had been violated. He pointed out that during interrogations, he repeatedly stated, "I don't want to talk about this," but the police went on questioning him. To everyone's astonishment, the court accepted his appeal, and all charges in that case were dismissed. The prosecution challenged this ruling, and after 7 years, he was granted a retrial, which once again resulted in a death sentence. Since that time, Owen has stayed in prison awaiting execution. As often occurs, there was a lengthy delay between sentencing and the actual execution, and this case was no exception. Owen's execution was set for June 15, 2023, nearly 39 years after the murders. Karen's younger sister attended to witness the death of her sister's murderer. She wanted to meet Owen's gaze, but he kept his eyes shut until the very end. It is worth mentioning that Karen's sister chose a career in law enforcement and became a sheriff. She explained that following Karen's murder, she suffered from insomnia and decided that if she could not sleep, she might as well do something meaningful. Moving on to the next case. Nicola Furlong. In this video, we examine the devastating case of a young woman whose dream trip abroad ended in an unimaginable tragedy. Tokyo is famous for its neon lights, endless energy, and relentless pace. Yet beneath the surface of this lively city lies a frightening darkness. An innocent young woman lost her life in a shocking and horrific event that disrupted the city's vibrant rhythm in May 2012 and left a lasting scar on both Japan and Ireland. On December 17, 1990, Nicola Furlong was born in a picturesque village in County Wexford, Ireland, to Andrew and Angela. Nicola shared a close bond with her two younger sisters, Andrea, who was 3 years younger, and Hannah, who was 9 years younger. Raised in a small town in Wexford, Ireland, Nicola was widely recognized for her bright smile, her kind, beautiful, and generous spirit, and her infectious passion for life. From an early age, Nicola held a strong love for both sports and music. She became a skilled pianist and a dedicated athlete, often competing in local running and soccer competitions. Nicola also poured great effort and commitment into her studies. She was driven to seize every opportunity that came her way and excelled remarkably in school. Nicola enrolled at Dublin University to study international business and language after finishing her high school education in Ireland. However, because she enjoyed the course so much, her father Andrew suggested that she move to Japan when the opportunity arose to complete her education abroad. In 2011, she joined an exchange program at Takasaki City University of Economics in Tokyo, as she loved learning about different cultures and languages. For Nicola, this chance merged her passion for travel and new experiences with her academic ambitions, making it a dream realized. Although it meant spending an entire year apart from her friends, family, and boyfriend, she had to embrace the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Nicola may have underestimated the challenge of adapting to life in Tokyo. At first, she struggled to adjust to living in Japan. Tokyo, which is stunningly beautiful, was about 2 hours away from the area where she lived. However, since it was not in a major city, it provided a more traditional Japanese lifestyle. As a result, many people did not speak English as they might in a more modern setting. In addition, much of what Japan had to offer was clouded by the time Nicola spent missing her family. While she enjoyed her experience in Japan, her primary focus remained on completing her exchange year and returning home to her family. After some time, Nicola adapted to her surroundings, building friendships and immersing herself in Japan's vibrant culture. Locals came to know her as warm and approachable. She was more than just a student. Nicola was a young woman with a bright future ahead. In Tokyo, she often attended concerts and enjoyed exploring the city's music scene. She also kept a blog where she shared her experiences, keeping her friends and family back home updated on her journey. Her weekends were filled with adventures ranging from visits to historical landmarks to trying new foods. But before fate intervened, Nicola would write her final blog post. When Nicola's life was suddenly cut short, everything she had worked so hard to build, the friendships, the memories, the sense of belonging she had found in Japan, was lost in an instant. In May 2012, just a few months before her planned return to Ireland, Nicola and a fellow Irish student decided to attend a Nicki Minaj concert in Tokyo on the night of May 23rd. What was supposed to be a fun evening out, a brief escape from their busy academic schedules, would take a devastating turn. The two traveled about 2 hours by train to reach the city. After the concert, they planned to spend the night exploring bars around Tokyo before catching the first train back to campus in the morning. But as they studied the transit map, two American men, 23-year-old James Blackston and 19-year-old Richard Hines, approached them. The men struck up a conversation, introducing themselves as travelers from the United States. The girls were likely just happy to meet people who could speak fluent English, even though they did not know who these men were and initially showed little interest in them. James had flown in from Los Angeles, while Richard, a musician from Memphis, Tennessee, was also there, performing professionally as a dancer while on tour. The men appeared very friendly, and since they were familiar with the city's nightlife, they generously offered to show the young women around. Nicola and her friend thought they seemed trustworthy enough and agreed. Eventually, the four of them got into a taxi. While riding through the city, Richard and James told the girls that they had booked and paid for 2 rooms at the Keio Plaza Hotel in Shinjuku, a district well known for its lively nightlife. They offered the girls free use of one of the rooms for the night. However, Nicola and her friend explained that they were fine with staying out late and returning by train in the morning. What the girls did not realize was that Shinjuku, despite its reputation for a vibrant nightlife, also had a much darker side. With crime rates noticeably higher than other parts of Japan, the area was infamous for its more dangerous elements hidden among the neon-lit streets and bustling entertainment venues. The girls were unaware of the danger they were about to face and were simply glad to have met some new companions. When the group reached Shibuya, they decided to stop at the Scramble Bar. Nicola and her friend purchased the first round of drinks. The second round consisted of tequila shots, which Richard and James bought. However, according to Nicola's friend, the tequila affected her differently than usual. One moment she was enjoying the drinks and conversation, and the next she blacked out. From this point forward, the events of the evening become hazy. But just before 1 in the morning, Richard and James were recorded on camera placing the two heavily intoxicated women into the back of a cab, getting in themselves, and directing the driver to take them to the Keio Plaza Hotel in Shinjuku, located about 10 to 15 minutes away. Once they arrived at the hotel, everything began to deteriorate. After being separated, Nicola and her friend were taken to different rooms by one of the men. At this stage, it is believed that both women were still completely incapacitated and not even fully conscious of what was occurring. Rising to the twin towers overlooking the city center, guests of the Keio Plaza Hotel, a long-standing symbol of Tokyo's wealth and hospitality, usually blend with locals in the lobby. However, the vibrant atmosphere of Tokyo's Shinjuku district began to fade as the night of May 23rd turned into the early morning hours of May 24th. A horrific crime was unfolding inside one of the hotel rooms high above the bustling streets. The intelligent and adventurous young woman, Nicola Furlong, had unknowingly walked into a nightmare. At approximately 12:50 a.m., the men, Nicola, and her companion arrived at the hotel. According to security footage, Richard and James were fully aware of how severely intoxicated Nicola and her friend were. In fact, the men can be heard mocking the girls on the video, laughing, and bragging about what they intended to do once they got them back to the hotel rooms. When the taxi pulled up to the hotel, the women were so incapacitated that they could not walk on their own. To take the girls to their rooms, the men asked the hotel staff for 2 wheelchairs. Without hesitation, the staff provided them, and the men wheeled the women away, unaware that this night would be the final one for one of them. In the unsettling security footage, the women are seen being wheeled off completely against their will. Nicola was under Richard's control, while James pushed her friend away. At around 3:20 a.m., the duty manager went to room 1427, Richard's room, after a noise complaint had been made. When the manager entered the room, after knocking repeatedly with no response, Nicola was lying on the floor. It was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. Emergency responders soon transported Nicola and her friend, who had been found in a separate room, to a nearby hospital. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, Nicola never regained consciousness, and her death was declared shortly after 3:55 a.m. Her family and friends were left devastated and in shock, unable to comprehend how this could have happened. Only hours earlier, she had been overjoyed about attending the concert that night. She had been thrilled. How could such a joyous evening have turned into a nightmare in only a few hours? Thankfully, investigators quickly identified the men responsible for harming the 2 young women. They were the same American men, Richard Hines and James Blackston, who had been with the girls at the bar earlier and whose names were on the hotel room registrations. Both men were located and immediately taken into custody for questioning. Initially, the men were not charged with Nicola's murder. Instead, they were charged with assaulting a woman in the back seat of the cab they had taken earlier that night. Yet police strongly suspected that both women had been drugged before passing out, even if at that point it remained a theory. Before pursuing more serious charges, investigators awaited the toxicology results from Nicola's samples. Meanwhile, an autopsy was being conducted to determine the true cause of her death. To put it mildly, these results were unexpected and wouldn't be known until June 15th. After conducting the autopsy, Professor Kenichi Yoshida concluded that Nicola had not overdosed. Instead, something soft, like a towel, had probably been used to limit her breathing. It was also mentioned that it probably took Nicola a number of minutes and a great deal of distress to pass away, which is probably why other hotel guests complained about the noise. The police were prepared to intensify their investigation now that they knew the precise cause of Nicola's death and formally charged James and Richard with first-degree murder. Ireland and Japan were both rocked by the crime. Devastated by the loss, Nicola's family demanded justice for their cherished daughter. Her father, Andrew, and mother, Angela, came to Tokyo and went through the difficult process of grieving for their daughter in a foreign and faraway place. In the hopes that Nicola would receive justice from the Japanese legal system, they looked for answers and accountability. Fortunately, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police moved swiftly and gave the case the serious attention it required. They meticulously pieced together what happened that fatal night, collected evidence, and submitted security footage for forensic examination. After a comprehensive investigation, the hotel room yielded evidence that directly linked Hines and Blackston. However, it wouldn't be that easy. Even though they were obviously at fault, these men weren't going down easily. Detectives believed that Richard's actions on the night that Nicola died were probably motivated by a combination of plain hostility and alcohol. Because of his difficult upbringing, Richard harbored a great deal of animosity and bitterness toward other people. According to the investigation, he had seized Nicola in a moment of rage, committing an unimaginable act of violence that devastated her friends and family. It is still up for discussion what exactly went wrong for him to lose control. We don't know if he was acting violently before he ever got Nicola to the hotel room, or if he was triggered by something she said. In any event, Nicola bore the brunt of his hostility and paid a heavy price for it. James was having Nicola's friend in the adjacent room while all of this was going on. Richard Hines would deny that he killed Nicola on purpose. He asserts that although everything they did that evening was entirely voluntary, things went too far, and Nicola ended up dead as a result. The cops didn't believe him when he insisted that whatever happened to Nicola was an accident. Even more information surfaced as the case proceeded to trial in March 2013, which, to be honest, didn't help matters much, and only served to confirm the investigators' worst fears. In order to force Nicola and her friend to return to their hotel rooms against their will, the prosecution claimed that on the relevant night, Hines and Blackston had given them a dose without their knowledge. This has essentially been verified. Professor Yoshida, who conducted Nicola's autopsy, claims that Nicola had scratches on her neck, suggesting that she had attempted to defend herself against her assailant and probably did so for a considerable amount of time. Yoshida claims that Nicola's death was caused by a horrific means. This man would have had many minutes to simply stand there and look into his victim's eyes while she struggled back and hung on for dear life. It was vicious, just vicious. There was no possibility that this could have happened by accident. When Nicola's companion was asked to testify during the trial, she tried her best to reconstruct what had happened that night before the tequila shot that knocked her unconscious. She mentioned that both of the girls declined the men's offer to return to their hotel rooms because they were in serious relationships. The men never backed off, even though they pretended to. The tequila then appeared, and according to Nicola's buddy, she passed out a few minutes after receiving the shot. After this, she doesn't remember anything. The only thing she does remember is waking up in a hospital bed. According to the defense team, Richard Hines was a good man who only wanted to assist these two young women in getting to a safe place, such as their hotel room, so they could sleep off the affects of the alcohol they had consumed. However, the males could be heard yelling gleefully about how these girls had, quote, fallen into their lap in CCTV footage that police were able to retrieve from the taxi trip to the hotel. They even bumped fists while they were examining the two women and discussing what they were going to do to them. This was not an accident of any kind. Everything was meticulously planned and calculated. Even worse, as detectives dug more into the histories of these two men, they discovered that James had previously been blamed for a similar crime. In fact, another woman accused James of stealing from her and tampering with her drink less than a month before Nicola died. When Richard finally had the chance to defend himself, he shamelessly tried to tarnish Nicola's character. He painted her as nothing more than a bar hopper looking for someone to help her get drunk, implying that she went out that night with the sole intention of becoming as intoxicated as possible and was willing to go along with anyone who could make that happen. Nothing could be further from the truth, and the evidence showed it. For many, the most devastating part of the trial was the prosecution's presentation of the hotel lobby footage. It was painfully clear that Nicola and her friend desperately needed help, and yet not a single person in that lobby intervened. The girls were visibly too intoxicated to comprehend their surroundings, yet nobody suggested calling emergency services, alerting security, or even questioning the men escorting them. Instead, hotel staff simply complied with Richard and James's request for wheelchairs and even helped place the incapacitated women into them. The lack of basic human concern was appalling and remains one of the most haunting aspects of this case. Nicola's grieving family attended the trial, forced to relive the agonizing details of their daughter's final hours. When the time came for them to make a victim impact statement, they pleaded with the judge to impose the harshest possible punishment. But Japanese law at the time viewed Richard differently. At just 19, he was still considered a juvenile, and under the law, minors could not receive the same severe sentences as adults. While reforms to these regulations have since been made, they did not apply retroactively to Richard's case. In the end, despite being convicted, the maximum sentence he faced was 5 to 10 years in prison. Today, he is free, a reality that only deepens the injustice felt by Nicola's family and friends, who will never get back what they lost. James Blackston, his partner, was convicted of assaulting Nicola's friend, yet his sentence was even lighter. In 2015, after serving 3 years of hard labor, he was released. His crimes in Japan amounted to only a brief incident in what he treated as an otherwise impressive life, and upon returning to the United States, he continued his career as a dancer. Both of these men proved themselves repeat offenders, yet they still managed to avoid real accountability. Since Nicola's death, her family has worked tirelessly to keep her memory alive by creating scholarships in her name and advocating for the safety of young people abroad. Out of this tragedy, positive changes have been introduced, aiming to prevent similar incidents in the future. In Tokyo, students have responded well to campaigns that highlight travel safety, particularly directed at young women studying overseas. At the same time, stricter security measures have been adopted by hotels in Tokyo and other major cities to better protect their guests, in the hope that such a crime will never happen again. Although these changes may seem small, they represent a collective effort to make sure no other family endures the same heartbreak Nicola's has, nor the ongoing suffering of her friend. With incredible courage, Nicola's family has shared her story so that it may serve as both a warning and a lesson for others. They continue to honor her memory, remembering Nicola as the vibrant, loving, and talented young woman she was. From this tragedy, one undeniable truth emerges. Justice was served, but sometimes justice alone is not enough. These two men should have faced consequences lasting the rest of their lives for what they did to Nicola and her friend. Instead, while Nicola's family remains shattered and her friend struggles with the pieces of a life forever changed, the men responsible are free to enjoy their lives as though nothing ever happened. Every sense of security and peace was stolen from these families, and true serenity will never return. Yet the perpetrators move forward unscathed, and we are told to accept this as justice. Moving on to the next case. Patricia Carnahan and Nikki Allen. On September 28, 1979, 3 people anonymously reached out to the editor of a local newspaper, stating that while they had been walking through a campground in South Lake Tahoe, they had come across the lifeless body of a woman. After receiving the anonymous tip, the editor quickly contacted the sheriff's deputies, informing them of a possible discovery of a woman's body at Sugar Pine Point State Park. Shortly after, the police responded to the report and discovered the dead woman's body in a picnic area located on the western shore of Lake Tahoe. The victim had been raped, beaten, and strangled to death. From the evidence at the scene, police concluded that the woman was probably pursued through the picnic area, leaving behind one of her flip-flops in the process. Authorities believe the woman struggled against her attacker forcefully throughout the park while attempting to escape. Police could not identify the body since she carried no identification of any kind. Detectives concluded that she had been traveling on her own. In a tragic turn, investigators suspected the woman may still have been alive when the 3 people came upon her. Yet, the absence of movement and the horrific condition of the body may have concealed this fact. Detectives collected crucial evidence from the scene, including DNA samples taken from a beer bottle found near the woman's body and DNA retrieved from the victim herself. The police tracked down and interrogated the individuals who initially located the body, asking why they had not reported it directly to law enforcement. The 3 admitted to police that they had active warrants for their arrest and wanted to avoid involvement. Police examined these individuals, but ultimately cleared them. Despite the detectives' considerable efforts, they failed to establish the woman's identity. They released a sketch of the victim to local media, but did not gain any results. The authorities estimated that the woman was roughly between 35 and 45 years old, standing between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches in height, and weighing approximately 115 to 130 pounds. At the time of her murder, she had been wearing a lavender t-shirt, Levi bell-bottom jeans, and leather sandals with a leather strap across the arch. She also wore a gold wedding band inscribed with the words, quote, "To Mac from P&B," as well as 2 other rings and a necklace featuring a pendant resembling a deer. Pursuing several leads, detectives investigated claims that the deceased had previously stayed at a motel in South Lake Tahoe and had recently won a significant sum of money playing Keno in the casinos before her death. During the investigation, detectives carefully reviewed major prize winners at various local casinos but failed to find any useful clues regarding the woman's identity. She was buried at the Tahoma Cemetery in an unmarked grave labeled, quote, "Unknown female." For over 35 years, the woman's identity remained a mystery. Then in 2014, the case was handed over to investigator John Gaines, who had recently joined El Dorado County's Cold Case Homicide Unit. This specialized division focused on re-examining unsolved murders from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Gaines learned that the woman's body had been buried along with her jewelry. As a result, he authorized the exhumation of the unidentified remains and released photographs of the jewelry in the hope that someone might identify it. Gaines noted that the necklace the woman wore had initially been mistaken for a deer design. However, after closer examination, he realized it was actually a chai pendant, a symbol of Jewish heritage representing life. The photographs were circulated in newspapers throughout the country. And in 2015, a major development took place. When a 61-year-old woman contacted the police, she told them that her missing mother had worn a pendant similar to the one shown in the photographs. The woman submitted a DNA sample, and at last, the unidentified body was identified as Patricia Carnahan. It was discovered that in 1979, Patricia, who was 35 years old at the time, had been on a solo trip through California in her red Volkswagen microbus. She had informed her family that she was on her way back home, but she never made it. Her family filed a missing person report after she did not return home or communicate with them. Her van was subsequently discovered abandoned at a car dealership in Venice. At that time, authorities could not link the van to the unidentified woman since her body had been found nearly 440 miles away at a campground in South Lake Tahoe. The mystery of how Patricia's van ended up such a great distance from her remains is still unresolved. Although the victim was finally identified after 35 years, her murderer remained unknown. Detectives then cross-checked the DNA from the beer bottle with the DNA obtained from Patricia's body. They verified that both samples matched, allowing them to build a DNA profile for deeper investigation. The profile was compared to the 3 people who had originally discovered Patricia's body in 1979. Nevertheless, no match was found with any of them. The DNA profile was subsequently uploaded into Cody's, but no hits were produced at that stage. However, in February 2023, a positive match was eventually obtained. As part of a national initiative to reduce the backlog of untested SAKs, sexual assault kits, officials in Washington state processed an SAK collected in 1994 from a case in Spokane, Washington. Once the DNA kit was tested, it was entered into Cody's. The DNA being examined was more than 20 years old. However, once the DNA was processed through the system, a definitive match was identified. The earlier DNA submitted to Cody's, developed from the evidence collected off Patricia's body, matched that of one Harold Carpenter. In 1994, Carpenter had been accused by a homeless woman of sexually assaulting her in Spokane. Medical staff collected evidence with an SAK. Carpenter insisted that the encounter had been consensual, while also alleging that the woman had stolen his wallet. He was taken into custody but released a day later after the case was considered, quote, unprovable. The female victim from the 1994 incident has since passed away. From 1994 until its eventual testing in 2023, the SAK remained on a storage shelf, unexamined for decades. Records revealed that Carpenter had been arrested in Susanville, California, on September 29, 1979, the day following Patricia's murder, for driving under the influence. He was then transferred to the Bonneville County Sheriff's Office in Idaho, where he had been wanted for burglary. Over the following decades, Harold Carpenter accumulated numerous misdemeanor arrests and convictions in both Idaho and Washington. These offenses included drug possession, disturbing the peace, reckless driving, and driving under the influence. By 2016, Carpenter was homeless in Spokane, Washington. Later, he moved into the Park Tower Apartments, a residence reserved for low-income, elderly, and disabled individuals. In 2018, Carpenter became a suspect in another sexual assault case in Spokane, Washington. Furthermore, the year before, he had been tied to an incident involving unwanted, inappropriate touching. Nonetheless, he was never arrested for either of those incidents. Carpenter was never considered a suspect in Patricia's murder. Although he cannot face charges for the 1994 Spokane case due to the statute of limitations expiring and the victim being deceased, he was arrested in February 2023 for the murder of Patricia Carnahan. He is presently detained without bond in Spokane, Washington, as the extradition process is underway. The case is set to proceed to trial, but for now, detectives can find relief knowing the case was resolved after 44 years. In 1992, Nikki Allen, aged 7, lived with her 26-year-old single mother and her 3 sisters. Residing in a small ground-floor flat in Sunderland, Tyne and Wear, England, the block of flats they lived in was called the Weir Garths block. It overlooked the Sunderland docks and the East End. These flats were often referred to as the Garths, and they accommodated roughly 1,000 residents. This area of low-income housing was known for being close-knit and largely populated by working-class people. Despite existing in a neighborhood burdened by poverty and criminal activity, the community bonds were strong. Nikki was a charming young girl, described as lively and full of spirit. Nikki enjoyed exploring and visiting different places such as carnivals or any destination her school trips would take her. She cherished spending time with her friends and cousins and loved playing with her toys. Her family recalled that her favorite snack was cheese and onion-flavored crisps. Despite facing financial hardships, Nikki's mother Sharon deeply loved her children and constantly made sure they had food to eat and clean clothes to wear. Sharon's parents also lived in the Garths. They were close to their daughter and frequently helped Sharon care for her children. On October 7, 1992, Sharon went about her routine household tasks. While she was occupied with laundry in her twin-tub machine, her youngest daughter was asleep peacefully while her older 2, Stacy and Nikki, watched television. At some point in the evening, Sharon went to her parents' flat to collect some painkillers for a headache caused by the loud sound of the washing machine. Her parents' flat was only about 150 yards away from her own. Her 7-year-old Nikki chose to accompany her mother. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Nikki left her grandparents' flat on her own. The exact time of her departure is uncertain, as her mother Sharon stated it was 8:30 p.m., while witnesses and police believed it was closer to 10 p.m. Nevertheless, Sharon remembered that 10 minutes after Nikki left, she also departed from her parents' flat. She walked the 150 yards back to her flat, passing through the stairwell and a short corridor, eventually arriving at what would prove to be a horrifying scene. Upon entering, she discovered that her 7-year-old daughter, Nikki, had never returned. Sharon reported Nikki missing to the police within the hour. Officers arrived and immediately began a search for the missing child. Because the community was close-knit, news of Nikki's disappearance spread quickly. As a result, more than 100 committed volunteers gathered and began an extensive search operation, going door to door, combing parks, playgrounds, alleyways, industrial sites, and the riverbanks. The following morning, a group of searchers, including Nikki's own family members such as her aunt, came across a pair of shoes along with a coat that she had been wearing when she vanished. These 2 belongings were located outside the derelict and long-abandoned Quayside Exchange building. Inside the deserted Exchange building, the search team discovered Nikki's lifeless body. She was lying in a pool of blood. An autopsy revealed that Nikki had suffered blows to the head with a brick and had been stabbed 37 times in the chest and abdomen. The report also stated that she had been dragged by her ankles from the room where the attack began down into the basement, where she was ultimately found. While there were no indications of sexual assault, police believed the attack had started with a sexual motive, though investigators concluded the killer, for some reason, later abandoned this intent. The discovery of such a tragedy unleashed a wave of shock, horror, and outrage within a community that had once been peaceful. The gruesomeness of the crime scene and the age of the victim placed immediate pressure on police to find the person responsible for the crime. The detectives started their investigation by going door to door, questioning anybody who may have seen anything. A few witnesses came forward who claimed to have seen the young girl on the night of the murder. Some had said that they had seen Nikki around 10 p.m. begging for money outside of the local Boar's Head pub. Some recall that she had been begging for money to go to the sweet shop down the road, while another witness said that she was asking for a penny for the guy. A tradition amongst British children in which they collect money to buy fireworks for Guy Fawkes Night. Another witness, Margaret Hodgson, recalls that around 10 p.m. she was waiting to collect her mother from her shift at the fish factory. During this time, she recalled that she witnessed a young girl skipping to keep up with a man on Low Street as they made their way towards the Exchange building. Margaret thought that they were father and daughter, an assumption which she says will tragically live in her mind until the day she dies. Around the same time that Margaret Hodgson witnessed what police believed to be was Nikki following an adult man down a street, Patricia Irwin happened to also be walking past the abandoned Exchange building. She says that while she was walking, she discerned the sound of wood breaking accompanied by what seemed to be the distressed cries of a cat. In retrospect, she says she was horrified when she realized the true origins of those sounds. Another witness, Carol Osborne, says that she was in her nearby flat and became startled by two loud screams which reverberated through the area. She says that she vehemently believes the screams were that of a child. Shortly after, police released video footage of a man followed by a child walking towards the old Exchange building. The is of low quality, and it is difficult to identify the man or the child, but detectives do believe that this was the last sighting of Nikki alive. A few days later, a man called police and told them that a 14-year-old girl had approached him and had reported that a man soaked in blood had gone up to her on the night of the murder and had confessed to killing somebody. The call was made anonymously, and while police used the media to appeal to the man or the girl in order for them to come forward, they never did and nothing came of the tip. During their inquiries, one name always seemed to come back up, George Heron. At the time, George Heron was 24 years old, living with his sister, also in the Garths. Despite moving to the area with his sister just a few weeks prior, many people claimed that he frequently was visiting the Quayside Exchange building where Nikki's body was found. Several witnesses specifically placed him at the Boar's Head pub on the night of the murder. Additionally, a few remember that he was buying cheese and onion-flavored crisps, which were Nikki's favorite. Moreover, when questioned by police, George's sister stated that he had been acting strange the night of the murder. She recalls that upon returning home, George went straight to the bathroom and would spend the next half hour washing both his clothes and himself. His sister said this was very unusual for him. Detectives conducted a search of his home and found clothing and shoes stained with blood. Additionally, detectives found a knife which they believed to be the same weapon used in Nikki's murder, or at the very least they believed it was capable of inflicting wounds consistent with those found on her body. George was brought in for questioning, and while he initially denied knowing Nikki, he later admitted to having an acquaintance with her after witnesses came forward to say that they had seen him with Nikki on several occasions. George also flatly denied going out on the night of the murder despite several witnesses claiming they had seen him at the Boar's Head pub, and despite the fact that his sister confirmed his absence. While George categorically denied murdering Nikki on at least 120 separate occasions during his questioning, after 3 days of intense interrogation, George confessed to murdering Nikki. He was charged with Nikki's murder and was put on trial. George's trial was transferred to Leeds in fear that the community's hatred towards him would make it difficult to guarantee a fair trial in Sunderland. In fact, during his first appearance in the magistrate court, one man tried to attack George but was restrained by police officers. The crowd expressed their anger by shouting threats and vigorously banging upon the police van in which he was being transported. While George was in prison on remand, he was attacked by another inmate, resulting in a severe laceration across his face. George's trial commenced in Leeds Crown Court in October of 1993. Nikki's family, along with relatives and numerous members of the local community, made daily trips to attend the court proceedings. On many occasions, they had to be restrained from attempting to leap onto the dock to confront and attack George. Even though the bulk of the evidence against George was circumstantial, police and prosecutors were confident that a conviction based on George's confession would happen. The prosecutors alleged that George took the girl to the Exchange building. However, They postulate that when she started to scream, George tried to silence her by hitting her in the head with a brick. While Nikki fell to the ground, they said that George would again hit her with the brick as she lay. Detectives go on to say that most likely George took a knife and then mercilessly stabbed her in the chest, inflicting 37 stab wounds. However, upon reviewing the case, the judge criticized police for their handling of both the case itself and the suspect. He ruled that 7 of the 12 interview tapes, considered pivotal by the Crown Prosecution Service in substantiating his guilt, were deemed inadmissible. The judge then declared that police had distorted the evidence during their interviews with George. The judge questioned why only a legal executive, not a qualified solicitor, had been present for the first 6 hours of the interview. He said that police neglected their legal obligation to inform individuals being interviewed under caution about their right to have a qualified solicitor present during the process. He also criticized that police were using oppressive methods in order to get a confession. Moreover, the judge noted that the prosecution cited 2 different witnesses, both who provided 2 different descriptions of a man seen at the pub, and the judge said that there were notable discrepancies between their accounts. He continued that neither witness was actually able to identify George from a police lineup. The witnesses later testified that they were pressured by police to get a result. For example, Darren Baker, boyfriend of George's sister, initially stated in court that George was missing for an hour on the night of the murder. But he later confessed that his previous statement had been false. He said that George had been with the family watching TV on the night of the murder, but that police had arrested him as well under the suspicion of assisting an offender, and he himself had spent 5 days in prison. He then said that he told them what they wanted to hear in exchange for his freedom. After 6 weeks of deliberation, the judge acquitted George Heron of Nikki's murder. An uproar erupted in court with Nikki's mother collapsing, and her family members shouting profanities and anger. Fearing George's safety, the judge moved him out of Sunderland and gave him new identity. In 1994, Sharon sued George, seeking damages for battery of Nikki, resulting in her death. Heron did not contest the case. She won the case and was awarded €7,000. However, she never received the compensation as George could not be located, due to the fact that the government had provided him with a new identity. In the years that followed, Sharon endured overwhelming struggles trying to cope with her daily life without Nikki. Malicious rumors began circulating that Sharon had neglected her children and that she was a, quote, good-time girl who valued parties more than parenting. These claims were not only false but deeply painful for a grieving mother. Eventually, the rumors were disproven, yet they inflicted a heavy toll on Sharon and compounded her already unbearable suffering. In an attempt to regain some semblance of normal life, she remarried. However, the marriage faltered under the weight of her grief, and she later divorced. In a later interview, she remarked, quote, the only purpose of my life became caring for my other bairns and striving to obtain justice for Nikki, but I could not see how. Over the years, police investigated several suspects, including Stephen Grievetson, known as the Sunderland Strangler. He was questioned while serving 3 life sentences for murdering 3 boys, but he was never charged. In 2017, police reopened the investigation at Sharon's request and sought to utilize advances in DNA technology to identify the perpetrator. Detectives succeeded in extracting DNA from Nikki's clothing and developed a DNA profile. In 2018, a large-scale DNA screening of individuals in the area led them to connect 54-year-old David Thomas Boyd to the murder. In 2022, police formally charged David Boyd with Nikki's killing. Authorities revealed that at the time of Nikki's death in 1992, Boyd was 25 years old and lived only 3 doors away from Nikki's grandparents. Significantly, his girlfriend at the time had also been Nikki's babysitter. Investigators uncovered that Boyd possessed an extensive criminal history. In 1986, he had been convicted of breach of the peace after approaching 4 children, grabbing one, and asking for a kiss. In 1999, he was convicted of indecently assaulting a female under the age of 14. After the conviction, he admitted to his probation officer that he frequently had fantasies involving young girls. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Boyd forced Nikki through the 6-foot boarded-up window of the abandoned building. This was the sole access point into the structure, and Boyd clearly knew the building well, including exactly how and where to enter it. Just days before the murder, he had allegedly taken a 12-year-old boy to the same location, using the same window to get inside, under the pretense of showing him pigeons. Detectives explained that once inside the building, he crushed Nikki's skull with a brick, lifted her top to expose her chest, and repeatedly stabbed her. Police stated that he then dragged her body into the cellar. Although Boyd denied killing Nikki, he refused to step into the witness box to testify in his own defense. He claimed his DNA may have been transferred to Nikki when he spat from his flat's balcony while she was playing below. However, prosecutors strongly contested this claim. They emphasized that none of Boyd's DNA appeared on Nikki's coat, yet traces were located on her cycling shorts and her t-shirt. The prosecutor argued, quote, "These are the items of clothing that her killer would inevitably have had to touch while forcing her into the building, lifting her inside and manhandling her." Boyd had never been considered a suspect in the original investigation, despite having a prior criminal record. Authorities now believe he escaped suspicion because police were convinced that George Herron was the murderer. In fact, Boyd exploited the confusion in 1992 to fabricate a false alibi, even providing a statement during George's trial. On May 12, 2023, David Boyd was ultimately convicted of Nikki Allen's murder. It took the jury of 10 women and 2 men just 2.5 hours of deliberation to reach a guilty verdict. David is scheduled for sentencing on May 23, 2023. The lead investigator in the case stated, "Nikki would have been 37 years old today, and no one can know what her life might have become, but her future was brutally stolen by David Boyd. The pain and anguish he has caused to so many people is beyond measure. This is a monumental day for Nikki's family. I want to thank them for their remarkable strength. After 30 years, they finally have justice." Moving on to the next case. Sue Jiajian, a romantic triangle among close companions that spiraled beyond control and concluded with a vicious murder. On March 9, 1998, Monday morning, the campus of Taiwan's National Tsinghua University was still serene and pleasant as usual. No one could have imagined that in just moments, this serenity would collapse, spreading fear and chaos across the entire campus. A dreadful incident overturned everything at the Institute of Radiological Biology Research. At the back row of a lecture hall, something resembling a lifeless body was curled up beneath an air conditioning unit. The upper torso, especially the face, had been gravely corroded by a strong chemical, warping and disfiguring the victim's features in horrifying ways. When the university witnessed this ghastly scene, they immediately summoned the police. Once officers arrived at the location, even veteran detectives were appalled by the horrific condition of the body. They confronted troubling questions, such as who could have carried out such brutality on university grounds, and even more critically, who the tortured victim was. A pupil or a faculty member. As the probe began, it opened with a meticulous review of the roster of missing female students. Sue Jiajian, a second-year graduate student in the Research Institute, was one of the names that promptly captured police attention. This young woman had not appeared and had failed to make contact with anyone for 2 days, according to reports from her classmates and instructors. Her family, particularly her parents, were enduring deep anguish. They were persistently searching for her and calling all of her friends, yet nothing proved effective. With mounting dread, the police contacted Sue Jiajian's parents right away and urged them to help confirm the body's identity. The girl's parents were stunned upon seeing the remains. The face had been so terribly burned, swollen, and twisted that they could not recognize it. How could they determine whether this was their treasured daughter when all that survived was a ravaged corpse? As detectives were on the verge of giving up, they discovered a faint glimmer of hope, a pager that was still functioning beside the body. The father dialed his daughter's usual pager number with trembling hands and a grieving heart. The cold ring from the pager near the corpse shattered the suffocating silence. It served as a harsh and merciless confirmation of the victim's identity, extinguishing the family's fragile hope that their daughter might still be alive. The more investigators examined the site, the more unsettling details emerged. Sue Jiajian's body was found in a dreadful condition. Her shirt had been pulled above her chest, and her trousers were only half worn. It appeared that she had been sexually assaulted. Scratches on the floor and traces of struggle around the body indicated that a fight had taken place. A used condom discovered beneath the victim's left arm stood out as the most critical piece of evidence. Based on these preliminary signs, the theory of an assault followed by murder appeared to be the most probable. In order to begin gathering evidence, collecting DNA samples, and searching for fingerprints at the scene, investigators primarily pursued this line of thought. Yet after the site was thoroughly examined and the initial forensic tests completed, the broader picture gradually unfolded, revealing unusual characteristics. It became unmistakably clear that the setting had been deliberately staged. Every detail, from the position of the body to the placement of the condom, suggested that someone was attempting to mislead the authorities. This is not a typical sexual assault, crime scene investigators remarked. There were unmistakable indications that the entire location had been staged intentionally to derail the inquiry. It was evident that the perpetrator's aim extended beyond killing Soo Jae-jun. They had also created a false scenario to divert suspicion toward another person. This indicated that deeper motives were at work than initially perceived. As police traced the killer's path, they realized that although the perpetrator tried to conceal the crime, they were gradually exposing the nature of who they really were. Through what seemed like minor details, the clues at the scene began forming a profile of the offender. The first factor that reduced suspicion came from the security system at the research facility. A special access card was required to enter this building. This created an unseen barrier that made it impossible for anyone from outside to intrude by chance. The list of suspects was reduced to a particular group of individuals who regularly had entry to the lecture hall where the body was discovered. These individuals were mainly students from the Institute of Radiological Biology Research. Investigators noticed an unusual pattern on the floor in front of the teaching podium. Blood spatter appeared at steady intervals, forming a trail along the staircase that ascended upward. The perpetrator attempted to clean several areas, yet obvious evidence of their activity still remained. Significantly, some of these blood traces contained tiny fibers, most likely strands of hair. This indicated that the victim had probably been struck forcefully on the head, leading to heavy bleeding. The bloodstains further revealed that the body had been dragged from the bottom toward the top of the stairs, but the most crucial detail was that the stains ceased at each stair edge. These breaks acted like a silent admission. The culprit lacked the strength to haul the victim up the staircase in one effort and was compelled to pause at every step. This stood out as a peculiar observation. It would not have been particularly difficult for an adult man with average physical strength. All of these details pointed to a startling initial deduction. The crime was almost certainly committed by a lone individual, and that individual was most likely a woman. A completely new discovery redirected the course of the inquiry, shifting the focus from a male sexual predator to a far more intricate motive, possibly linked to the victim's involvement with another woman. The forensic examination report reinforced the original doubts and clarified many aspects of the case. One crucial finding utterly disproved the first theory. Although the scene had been arranged to suggest that Soo Jae-jun had been sexually assaulted, she had not been. This discovery made it even more evident that the perpetrator had deliberately staged a false scene to mislead the authorities. Crime scene specialists continued uncovering unusual marks on the floor. At regular intervals, parallel streaks with distinct shapes appeared. Initially, the police assumed these were the suspect's bare footprints. However, after conducting closer inspections with specialized lighting and magnifying tools, they reached a different determination. The impressions had not been made by bare feet. They were caused by bloody socks that had left prints. A forensic specialist explained that the detail was analyzed further once the smooth, horizontal ridges, the consistent designs in the traces, and the evenly spaced appearance were noticed. From these signs, the investigative unit concluded that the offender had likely been wearing short socks with horizontal stripes, a type commonly worn by female students. The corroded condition of the body was the final piece of evidence that advanced the inquiry to its next stage. The victim had been exposed to a highly corrosive acid capable of rapidly destroying tissue, according to forensic experts. After the university administration was informed of this result, they conducted an urgent stock review and uncovered something alarming. Certain substances required to produce this form of acid had either been removed or were missing compared with laboratory records. On the second day of the investigation, the authorities broadened their inquiries, directing attention to Soo Jae-jun's social circle. At the same time, they interrogated dozens of fellow students, close companions, and staff members at the Institute of Radiological Biology Research. By comparing accounts from different individuals, a complex outline of the victim's personal life gradually emerged. The investigative team labored tirelessly for long hours and identified two principal suspects. Zheng Huantai, an intelligent doctoral candidate at the institute, and Hong Xiaohui, Jiajin's classmate and close companion. Yet the most astonishing revelation was not the suspects themselves, but the intricate web of their relationships with one another. "This is not an ordinary love triangle," remarked a detective after documenting statements from several witnesses. According to accounts from other students, the Scientific Research Center concealed a highly complex emotional web beneath its formal surface. A unique connection existed between Su Jiajin and Hong Xiaohui. They were closest friends, yet in matters of love, they were complete opposites. Both of them were drawn to the same man, Zheng Huantai, a gifted and charismatic senior at the institution. Based on testimony, this affection went beyond admiration. It had deepened into something intense, with extreme actions taken in pursuit of his affection. The used condom recovered from the scene became significant once DNA testing confirmed that the fluid inside belonged to Zheng Huantai. However, when Huantai was contacted and informed of Jiajin's death, he displayed genuine shock. He emphasized that they had maintained regular communication via the internet during the 2 days Jiajin was missing. The police digital investigation unit uncovered irregularities in Jiajin's online activity. In the early hours of March 7th, Jiajin posted a message to an individual with the nickname Dada on the university's BBS forum. The message originated from an account called Xiao Xiao, which was his personal alias. This was confirmed to belong to Zheng Huantai. More precisely, Huantai received an email from Xiao Xiao's address that same evening at 9:20 p.m. Yet when the autopsy results were reviewed, a glaring inconsistency appeared. Authorities stated that Jiajin had died between 2 and 5 a.m. on that very day, which was before those online messages were sent. Someone had been communicating with Huantai through Jiajin's account, even though she was already deceased. This raised a critical question. After many hours of rigorous interrogation, investigators removed Zheng Huantai from the primary suspect list. He truly had no knowledge of Jiajin's death and possessed a sufficiently credible alibi at the time of the killing. Witnesses confirmed that he had been present at another location unconnected to the crime scene. Now Hong Xiaohui, the remaining suspect, became the focal point of attention. When innocent people are accused of murder, they generally panic. Yet Xiaohui remained unnervingly calm, almost arrogant, as though she were engaging in a psychological contest. Her testimony only raised further doubts. She claimed the last time she saw Jiajin was in the early hours of March 7th, when she met her outside to discuss their relationship with Huantai. According to her statement, the conversation lasted until 6 a.m. However, the forensic report indicated that Jiajin had died before 5 a.m., making it impossible for her to have been alive when Xiaohui described their talk. Seasoned investigators recognized there were only two possibilities. Either Xiaohui had simply misremembered the time, or she had deliberately fabricated the story to create a false alibi. When the digital investigation team expanded their surveillance, they made a crucial breakthrough. They traced the suspicious emails sent to Zheng Huantai and discovered they had originated from a computer inside the Institute of Radiological Biology Research's computer room. This was not an ordinary machine. It was a particular one positioned in a secluded corner, hidden from the entrance. The technical team quickly retrieved the login records and found that Hong Xiaohui's account had been accessed just before Su Jiajin's account was used to send the emails. It would have been impossible for two different individuals to log in separately within the span of 2 minutes. To confirm further, detectives interviewed everyone present in the computer room at that period. One detail consistent across all their accounts was that only Xiaohui had used that computer during the critical time frame. That day, no one recalled seeing Jiajin enter the computer room. Based on this data, a digital specialist concluded, "We have grounds to believe Xiaohui momentarily logged into her own account out of habit, then noticed her error and logged out before signing in with Jiajin's account." Even though she attempted to cover her activity, the computer system still preserved complete records of all her logins. Even though this digital evidence built a case against Hong Xiaohui with a lot of suspicious circumstances, prosecutors still didn't have direct proof linking her to the murder. No one saw the crime. There were no fingerprints, and there was no clear murder weapon. Even more confusing to the investigators was Xiaohui's behavior during the probe. She behaved in an unusually calm way. Xiaohui kept a cold, almost emotionless face. Even when she was taken to the morgue to see Jiajin's autopsy, which was a psychological trick police often used to scare suspects. A criminal psychologist said, "That's a worrying reaction. Seeing the body of a close friend being cut up would make someone very upset, even if they weren't the killer. It's not normal for her to not be emotional." The police switched investigation teams several times and used different questioning methods, but Xiaohui didn't change. Instead of defending herself, she went on the attack, saying that many of her peers were lawyers and that she would sue the police if they didn't stop her. The case seemed to be coming to a dead end because there wasn't enough solid proof to prove anything. In this case, the Taiwan Criminal Investigation Bureau chose to bring in a top expert, Chun Xiaogui, who is the famous head of the Time Determination Center and is known as Taiwan's female Sherlock Holmes. Chun Xiaogui chose to look at the crime scene again from the start, this time with more experience and a fresh point of view. He would focus on details that had been missed during earlier examinations. She carefully looked at all of the victims' things using special lights and microscopes with a high magnification. The effects of this meticulousness were not what was expected. Chun found a broken piece of Su Jiajin's fingernail on his sweater, tucked away among the thick fabric fibers. This was an important detail that wouldn't have been seen during normal exams. As she carefully put the piece of nail into an evidence bag, she said, "This could be the key." The piece of nail was sent right away to a lab to be analyzed. Forensic experts compared it to nail samples from Hong Xiaohui and everyone else involved in the case. There was no doubt about it. The broken nail piece on the victim's clothes belonged to Xiaohui. The investigation team had enough reason to ask for a search warrant for Xiaohui's home once they had the first physical proof. As they looked, they found a pair of sneakers in a closet corner that had blood on them. The spots had been tried to be cleaned, but they were still there. The blood on the shoes was definitely Jiajin. After a quick test, Hong Xiaohui finally gave up when she saw the hard evidence. A broken nail on the victim's clothes and shoes in her room that had blood on them. The cold, cocky mask disappeared in an instant and was replaced by tears and deep regret. "I was wrong to do that. We were just having a fight. I didn't believe that." Xiaohui's statement slowly unveiled a tale of envy, betrayal, and a moment of impulsivity that ended in tragedy that could not be fixed. Xiaohui asked to meet Jiajin's parents to grovel and say sorry because he was in a lot of pain and regret. What kind of love-hate relationship did these two close friends have that made one of them push the other into a dark pit, which had such terrible results? In fact, Xiaohui and Jiajin knew each other before they went to National Tsinghua University. In 1995, both of them took classes to get ready for graduate school. They quickly became friends because they liked the same things and often went to class together. After a year, they both passed the test to get into the Institute of Radiological Biology Research at National Tsinghua University, Taiwan. They were even put in the same dorm room. As time went on, they grew closer and became best friends who told each other everything. This story should have been a beautiful coming-of-age tale, but when one person showed up, everything changed. A guy named Zheng Huantai. He wasn't like other people. He came from a wealthy family in Bingo City and was the only kid. He was spoiled. Huantai was the center of attention because he had all the right traits. He went to the graduate school at National Tsinghua University after his military service and really showed off his skills there. Because he did so well in school, he was able to skip straight to the doctoral program. After only 1 year of graduate school. This is an honor that not many students get. Huantai was not only very smart, but he was also very good-looking and well-behaved, which made many female students on campus want to be with him. Girls always came by the lab where he worked, saying they were looking for academic help, but really just wanted to get closer to the smart doctoral candidate. Even though Huantai was in a healthy relationship with a female student at the same school, other girls still seemed to fall in love with him. Because the study institute was small and everyone met every day in the same small space, feelings and relationships often became stronger and more focused. Jiajin was quickly drawn to Huantai's charm because she was so lively and passionate. She knew he had a girlfriend, but she couldn't stop her feelings from rising. She thought her love was special enough to get past any problems when she was young and naive. Like many girls in love, Jiajin needed someone to talk to, and her best friend was the only person who could really understand her. During the long nights in the room, she told Hong Xiaohui everything she felt deeply. Not what Jiajin thought would happen was that someone would listen to her and be quietly in love with her too. For a long time, Xiaohui had feelings for Huantai, but because she was shy, she never told anyone, not even her best friend. Whenever Jia Zhen talked excitedly about Huan Tai, it made Xia Hui's heart tense up with pain and anger. There was a lot going on when Xiao Hui acted more bravely than her quiet exterior suggested, because she was afraid of losing the man she secretly loved. She not only approached Huan Tai in secret, but she also went further than Jia Zhen and started a **** relationship with him. She did all of this without telling her friend, who was too trusting. While the two young women got more involved in their fight for love, Zheng Huantai, who was at the center of this love triangle, showed an amazing attitude. Instead of setting clear limits or ending relationships that weren't clear, he enjoyed being pursued without being responsible. He was happy to accept Jiazhen and Xiaohui's love, even though he already had a girlfriend. Even though he told everyone that he only saw the girls as friends and younger sisters, he was seeing both of them in secret. The strange thing about this story was how Jiazhen and Xiaohui were related to each other. Their friendship and rivalry were intertwined in a complicated way. Even though they both wanted the same guy and had been hurt by betrayal, they stayed together in a strange way. When there were dangers from outside, the idea of two girls who could fight very badly in the morning but become best friends by afternoon when someone talked to Huantai showed how skewed this relationship was. The craziest thing happened when a girlfriend list was made, which was a secret deal about how to split Huantai's time and attention. After the official girlfriend, Jiazhen was in second place in this strange hierarchy, and Xiaohui was in third. In July 1997, the tense relationship started to show up in real life. When Huantai's official girlfriend's car was the target of a series of strange attacks, the tires would get holes in them right after they were fixed. In October, things got worse when this girl's important experimental data was also removed for no clear reason. Huantai told other people that he thought Jiazhen and Xiaohui were to blame. However, these accusations stayed just rumors among graduate school students because there wasn't any solid proof. Eventually, the events disappeared without any consequences. The two didn't just hate the legal girlfriend. They hated everyone. Anyone who showed signs of being close to Huantai could be the next person on their watch list. As of November 1997, Huantai had invited Han, an administrative assistant at the research center, to a late dinner. This made Jiazhen and Xiaohui very jealous. Soon after, on December 2nd, a well-thought-out plan came together and was carried out. Jia Zhen approached Ms. Han after work with skill, saying she needed help checking out a problem in the bathroom. Ms. Han went with her because she had to work. When she got to the bathroom, she saw that Xiaohui was also there. The situation quickly turned violent without giving Ms. Han a chance to understand what was going on. Xiaohui punched Ms. Han in the chin without notice. Along with the violence, there was a clear threat. Ms. Han had to stop talking to Huantai, or else bad things would happen. After the fight, Ms. Han told the department head right away and hoped to get an official apology from the two students who were acting badly. But when they were called in and told what was being said, both Jiazhen and Xiaohui denied having anything to do with what happened, making things difficult to handle. In this situation, the department head thought that Xiaohui could be violent because she had shown signs of jealousy in the past, but he also didn't fully believe Ms. Han's story. At first, the school suggested a formal solution. Jiazhen and Xiaohui would have to write apologies and promise not to do it again. But because there weren't enough sanctions or ways to make sure that the rules were followed, this plan ended up being just a suggestion and wasn't really put into action. In order to find other ways to solve the problem, the school asked parents from both sides to talk about what happened. But the parents of both Jia Zhen and Xiaohui couldn't believe that their girls, who they thought were great students and well-behaved, could do such violent things. This made it impossible to settle the argument. Since everyone couldn't agree on anything, the department head gave Ms. Han one last option. The school was ready to give her the necessary documents and testify in court if she wished to take legal action against the two students. But Ms. Han decided not to go to court over the event. She may not have wanted it to turn into a complicated lawsuit that would have affected her work and personal life. In the end, the school took the lightest possible action. Jia Zhen, Xiaohui, and Huantai were not allowed to go to the third-floor north bathroom area where the incident happened, unless they had to for school-related reasons. This measure had two different goals. It stopped Jia Zhen and Xiaohui from bothering Ms. Han further, and it also kept them from being falsely accused by Ms. Han. Ga Zhen and Xiao Hui's relationship looked like a picture with lines of conflicting allegiance and rivalry all tangled together. When a common thread emerged, like when other girls showed signs of being close to Huantai, they put aside their differences right away and formed a united front that pushed back any possible rivals. However, as soon as the outside threats stopped, their relationship went back to being stressful right away. They went from being friends to being each other's most dangerous enemies. Because of this situation, the atmosphere was always tense, and even small issues could lead to bigger fights. Jiajin had told her friends that she was very unhappy with Xiao Hui. She thought that Xiao Hui was not as good as the other girls who were trying to win Huai's love. But she was greedy and wanted everything, even forcing Jiajin to give up her boyfriend. Jiajin's confidence showed that she felt sad about her friendship with Huantai. Even though she knew she couldn't keep him forever, she still wanted to be happy for a while before she graduated. As Xiao Hui's competitors got stronger, Jiajin switched to a material plan to strengthen her position. Her father was the head of the technical department at a famous Taiwanese store, so she came from a wealthy family. To win over guys, she started giving them gifts. Huantai received gifts that were more and more valuable over time. These gifts ranged from small, everyday items to expensive items. The way Huantai reacted to these gifts made things even worse. As a man should, he should have refused. But he gladly took everything. Xiao Hui also started giving gifts to compete with Jiajin. The situation with her family was also fine, but they were only middle class. It wasn't easy to find enough money to buy gifts for Huantai. Xiao Hui should have been working on her graduation project, but she went to work at a bar to make money for this gift-giving competition. She even got a rich man to help her. She liked how this man paid a lot of attention to her and gave her 2 credit cards with very high limits. When she got the cards, she used the whole credit limit to buy Huantai a pricey cell phone. Indeed, Huantai had enough money to buy it himself, but he was still grateful for the gift, even though it was very expensive and fancy. Clearly, this race couldn't decide a winner, which made the 2 girls even more angry and jealous of each other. Every day their hate grew stronger, and on the morning of March 6, 1998, the last thing that set everything off happened. Jiajin gave Xiao Hui her own credit card so she could shop. After shopping until lunch, Xiao Hui returned the card as usual. And then she and Huantai went for a walk in the evening with another friend. It seemed like a calm evening until Jiajin went to buy some shoes and found out the shocking truth. Her credit card had been maxed out, making the purchase impossible. As soon as they realized this, all of their long-standing suspicions and resentment erupted into a direct confrontation. Jiajin openly accused Xiao Hui of betraying her trust by stealing her credit card. Xiao Hui became extremely furious, believing that Jiajin was deliberately trying to disgrace her in front of Huantai. In the early morning of March 7th, with tensions still high from the previous night's conflict, Xiao Hui proposed a private meeting in the lecture hall of the Research Institute. Both of them demanded that the other stay away from Huantai. Inside the empty lecture hall, they shouted at one another. Each side insisted on defending her own rights while denying the other's worthiness. When long-suppressed emotions finally burst out, Xiao Hui struck Jiajin hard across the face, unable to restrain her fury any longer. Not stopping there, she seized Jiajin by the hair and smashed her head forcefully against the concrete floor of the lecture hall, causing her to bleed heavily and lose consciousness. Instead of immediately seeking medical aid, Xiao Hui rushed to the research center, fetched a bottle of toxic anesthetic, and poured it over her. She believed this would prevent Jiajin from regaining consciousness and exposing what had happened. She then used all her strength to drag her rival step by step into the lecture hall, concealing her behind the rear air conditioning unit. She wiped the floor with gauze and swiftly departed the crime scene, discarding the gauze and blood traces on her way back before going to sleep. Xiao Hui tried to appear composed that day while interacting with her peers. Around 9 p.m., she returned to the laboratory lecture hall. By then, Jiajin had already died from suffocation, as the lethal anesthetic had evaporated into a poisonous gas. Xiao Hui then retrieved chemicals used for producing acid in an effort to eliminate evidence. Because the laboratory's containers were all small and designated for teaching and experiments, she managed to pour acid only on the victim's face and neck. Afterward, she placed a used condom from her relationship with Huantai beside the corpse as a symbol of their connection. She did this in an attempt to implicate Huantai. Next, she broke into Jiajin's password and began communicating with Huantai in her place. Yuan and Xiaowei sat side by side in court. She never spoke a word to the man who had driven her into madness. Perhaps she realized that she had not loved this man as deeply as she believed when she killed Jiajin. What may have begun as love gradually transformed into rivalry and jealousy, clouding her judgment. Otherwise, she would not have attempted to shift blame onto Huantai in the end. The first trial verdict was announced by Xinzhou District Court on June 10, 1998. Xiaowei was sentenced to 18 years in prison, stripped of all civil rights for 10 years, and ordered to compensate Jiajin's parents with 2.417 million Taiwanese yuan, equivalent to about $80,000. The ruling was upheld by the appeals court. Xiaowei abandoned further appeals and began serving her sentence in January 1999. Many people praised Xiaowei's conduct in prison and encouraged her to continue her positive behavior. She later applied for release 4 times, but was rejected each time because the manner in which she killed the victim was deemed excessively cruel. Until November 27, 2008, when she applied for parole for the 5th time, the court finally approved, acknowledging that the 34-year-old Xiaowei had demonstrated sincere remorse, carried a low risk of reoffending, and had concrete plans for the future. She was granted parole. Many bitter lessons can be drawn from this case about how love can descend into tragedy, friendship can transform into enmity, and a poisonous atmosphere of rivalry can drive individuals to commit terrible acts. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.